Before we get going this week, I just want to put out a trigger warning that Genesis 34 is one of those chapters that feels pretty heavy. So, if at any point in reading chapter 34, you're feeling uneasy or feeling your trauma triggers or feeling panicky, it's okay to stop reading that chapter and move on to the next one, right? Because God is not trying to see how mature you are by how much you can handle, right? He knows what you can handle. So if reading Genesis 34 um, is hard for you this week, it's okay. You don't have to read it because Genesis 34 is kind of one of those chapters where the Bible refuses to look away from human brokenness, right? Something deeply harmful happens in this chapter, and a family is shaken, and anger rises. And what follows is reaction that moves faster than reverence, right? So I'm not going to camp in the details of it. The text doesn't sensationalize it, and neither am I, but it does tell the truth that harm is real and that sin is destructive and unrestrained anger multiplies damage, right? So here's what's even more sobering about this chapter is that the covenant family is involved, right? This is Abraham's line and the family through whom God promised blessings to the nations, and yet they are capable of reacting in ways that do not reflect his heart, right? And why does that matter theologically? Because it reminds us that being chosen does not eliminate our capacity to sin. Covenant does not erase human frailty. It just reveals our need for grace, right? When something wrong happens, something rises up in us, especially if you love deeply, especially if you have lived through a threat before. The brain is designed to protect. The amygdala fires off, the body prepares to defend, and that instinct isn't sinful. It's how God wired us to survive in a fallen world. But Scripture gently shows us that survival mode is not the same as spirit led obedience, right? Because the anger in Genesis 34 feels understandable, but it is not surrendered, right? It's not processed before the Lord, it's acted upon, and it leaves a wake of destruction. And the Bible, it's not endorsing this behavior either, because later in Genesis, that anger is rebuked. It's called fierce and cruel, right? And that's important because God distinguishes between justice and vengeance. Right? Justice belongs to him because he sees fully and judges rightly, right? Vengeance in human hands is almost always tangled up with ego and fear. And if we're honest, when we're dysregulated, urgency feels righteous, right? Reaction feels strong, but God's wisdom rarely moves at the pace of our adrenaline, right? And then we move into Genesis 35. And I love this so much because after the chaos, God speaks. And he doesn't disown Jacob. He doesn't revoke the covenant. He just says, arise, go up to Bethel. Okay, Bethel. This is a place of encounter. This is the place where Jacob once laid his head on a stone and saw heaven touching earth, right? The place where God reaffirmed the Abrahamic covenant, land, offspring, blessings, everything. God is essentially saying to him, come back to where I reminded you who you are. And this this is covenant faithfulness, right? God remains committed even when his people are inconsistent. His promises they're not fragile and they're anchored in his character. And before they go, Jacob tells his household to put away foreign gods and purify themselves, right? He's repenting. He's turning himself back. His return follows the rupture, right? And friends, that is grace. Right? God does not say, clean yourself up and then maybe I will meet with you again. He says, return and come as you are and lay down what does not belong. Right. And here is one thing that really steadied me in all of this is that as they move towards obedience, God protects them. The surrounding cities do not pursue them. Right. And this just really locked it in for me that safety flows from alignment, not aggression. Right. So if you live with anxiety or trauma, you know the instinct to secure yourself, right? To manage outcomes, to defend preemptively. But Genesis 35 whispers something a little different. Safety is not found in retaliation, it is found in returning to the presence of God. Right. And then when we move over into Proverbs 9, it puts language to tensions that we feel, right? Two invitations stand in front of us, wisdom or folly. And that's not abstract, it's embodied because wisdom, she builds her house and she prepares and she invites us into understanding, where folly is loud and reactive and she offers something that feels immediate. And here is the theological anchor, right? The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Fear here means reverent alignment. It means acknowledging God's holiness, his authority, his omniscience. It means trusting that he sees angles that we cannot see, right? Wisdom begins when we step out of self-trust and into God trust. And that isn't a weakness, that is worship, right? We're worshiping him when we do that. And then when we move into Psalm 46, it just wraps this whole week in something so steady. It steadied my heart. God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble, right? Refuge means shelter, not theoretical, but real shelter. And strength means sustaining power, not just initial rescue, but ongoing support. And very present means found or accessible or near. This psalm was written in the context of national threat. And could there not be better timing right now? The imagery is just amazing. Mountains falling, waters roaring, nations raging. Creation itself feels unstable, and yet God is in the midst of her. She shall not be moved. The city stands because God dwells there. God dwelling with his people. Bethel, the city of God, presence. This is a covenant thread. It's the ultimate fulfillment of that presence, or the ultimate fulfillment of that presence is Christ. God with us, the one who absorbs injustice without retaliating in sinful rage, the one who judges rightly because he is perfectly righteous, right? So Genesis 34 leaves us longing for that kind of redeemer. And Psalm 46 reminds us he is here, right? Be still and know that I am God. Stillness is not denial. It is surrender. It is loosening your grip on control. It is allowing your nervous system to settle in the reality that God is sovereign, right? You do not have to be unshaken. You just have to know where your refuge is. Right. This week shows us what happens when pain leads and what happens when we return and where safety is truly found. And again, if anything in Genesis feels heavy to you this week, stay in Psalm 46 and let it regulate you. Let it remind you that the covenant God is steady even when his people are not, right? He does not revoke his promises because of human inconsistency. He calls us back to Bethel. And maybe this week, Bethel for you is just 5 quiet minutes with Psalm 46. Maybe it's laying down the need to respond immediately, or maybe it's choosing wisdom over urgency. Whatever it is, just know he's not disappointed in you. He is inviting you, and he is very, very present.